I never thought I'd be the kind of girl who gets played. I wasn't naive, I wasn't desperate. I was just in love. Jake and I had been together for almost a year. He was charming, confident, maybe a little too confident. But I ignored the red flags because, honestly, I thought he loved me. I thought we had something real. Then one night everything changed. Started with something as simple as a missing phone. We were at a house party at his friend's place, and I had left my phone in the kitchen while grabbing drinks. When I came back it was gone. Jake was in the other room playing pool with his friends, so I figured maybe I had left it somewhere else. I retraced my steps, searching the living room, the hallway, even outside by the pool. Nothing. Then I heard laughter. Low, cocky laughter coming from the game room. Jake's voice. His friends' voices. The kind of laughter that makes your stomach tighten, like you're the punchline to a joke you don't understand yet. I froze just outside the door. Dude, I told you. He's obsessed with me. I could cheat on her, disappear for a week, treat her like trash, and she still wouldn't leave. More laughter. My blood turned to ice. You're full of shit, another guy, maybe Connor, chuckled. No girl is that loyal. Oh yeah. Jake's voice again, smug. Confident. The voice of someone who thought he had everything under control. Wanna bet? Silence. Then, no way. You serious? Hell yeah. $100 says she never leaves me. No matter what. A sinking feeling clawed its way up my throat. The voices blurred together as I tried to make sense of what I was hearing. Jake. My boyfriend. The guy who kissed me on the forehead when I was tired. The guy who whispered I love you against my skin. This was a joke. It had to be. But then I heard it. The sound of a handshake followed by a round of mocking applause. Deal. I stumbled back, my breath coming in short gasps. My chest ached like my ribs were caving in. I wanted to scream, to storm in there and throw my drink in his face. But my body wouldn't move. I felt sick. Humiliated. Had I really been that blind? Had I really been nothing more than some kind of twisted ego boost for him? I looked down at my hands, shaking with rage. I could confront him right now. Call him out in front of his friends, watch him scramble for an excuse. I could cry, make a scene, break up with him on the spot. But then an idea. My heart slowed. No. I wouldn't give him the satisfaction of a dramatic exit. I wouldn't let him play the victim when I walked away. If he thought this was a game, then I'd play too. And I'd make sure he lost. I walked away from that door, my mind spinning. The sound of Jake's laughter still rang in my ears, but instead of letting it crush me, I let it fuel me. I wasn't going to cry. Not yet. Not in front of them. I forced my breathing to slow as I reached the bathroom, locking the door behind me. My reflection stared back at me in the mirror. Wide eyes, flushed cheeks, lips pressed into a tight, thin line. I looked like a girl who had just had her heart shattered. But I wasn't just broken. I was furious. How could I have been so stupid? I squeezed my fists, nails digging into my palms. Jake thought he was untouchable, that I was some lovesick fool who would tolerate anything. That I would never leave him. He had no idea who he was dealing with. I took a shaky breath, straightened my shoulders and forced a smile. All right, Jake. You wanted a game? You got one. I wasn't going to leave him. Not yet. That would be too easy. No, I was going to make him fall. Hard. I was going to make him believe I was still completely in love with him, that he had me wrapped around his finger. I'd be the perfect girlfriend, the kind he bragged about. I'd make him feel like he had already won his bet. And just when he least expected it, just when he finally let his guard down, I'd leave. I'd walk away so completely, so coldly, that he'd feel the loss like a knife to the gut. I smiled, a real one this time. For the first time that night I felt in control. I unlocked the door and stepped back into the party, smoothing out my dress. The music pulsed through the house, people danced, laughed, oblivious to the war I had just declared. And then there he was. Jake stood by the pool table, cue stick in hand, looking as smug as ever. His friends cheered as he lined up a shot, the same ones who had just made a bet over my loyalty. He looked up and spotted me across the room, flashing me that easy, confident grin. A grin I had once found charming. I returned it, making sure my eyes were soft, my expression adoring. Hey babe, I said sweetly as I walked over, sliding my arms around his waist. Having fun. I felt his body relax under my touch. His arms wrapped around me casually, pulling me closer, and he pressed a quick kiss to my forehead like he always did. Like nothing had changed. Like he hadn't just humiliated me in front of his friends. Oh yeah, he said smirking. Just $150 off Connor. I laughed like I cared. Like I wasn't imagining all the ways I was going to tear his world apart. Well, aren't you lucky? I murmured, resting my chin on his chest, gazing up at him with the same wide-eyed devotion he expected from me. He had no idea. But soon he would. This game had just begun. The next morning I woke up with a plan. If I was going to make Jake fall for me, truly fall for me, then I needed to be perfect. The kind of perfect he couldn't resist. The kind of perfect that would make him believe without a shadow of a doubt that he had already won. I played my role flawlessly. That day when he picked me up for brunch, I greeted him with a bright smile, kissing his cheek as if I hadn't spent the night before plotting his downfall. You look beautiful, he said, running a hand through his hair. I tilted my head, brushing my fingers against his shirt as if I couldn't help but touch him. I wanted to look good for you. The way his chest puffed out slightly told me everything I needed to know. He loved this. Over pancakes and coffee I let him do most of the talking. I laughed at his jokes, even the ones that weren't funny. I leaned in closer when he spoke, my eyes locked on his like he was the most fascinating person in the world. And the best part? He had no idea it was all an act. I tested my limits, subtly pushing buttons to see how far I could go before he suspected anything. When his phone buzzed with a text from one of his friends, probably one of the guys who had been there for the bet, I glanced at it briefly but said nothing. That was important. I needed him to believe I was still completely oblivious. He grinned, stuffing his phone back into his pocket. Just the guys talking about last night. I smiled sweetly. Sounds like you had fun. Oh, you know how it is, he said, smirking. Just guy stuff. I could have thrown my coffee in his face right then and there. Instead, I reached across the table and laced my fingers through his. I love that you have such good friends, I said softly. He squeezed my hand, his thumb brushing over my skin. Yeah, they're the best. I wondered if he'd still say that when I was done with him. The trap tightens. Over the next few weeks I took things even further. I became the perfect girlfriend, the kind that guys like Jake dreamed of. I surprised him with coffee in the mornings, showed up to his games wearing his jersey, laughed at his stupid jokes and played the part of the cool girl who never got jealous, never complained, never asked for more than he was willing to give. I let him think he was winning. I let him believe he had me exactly where he wanted me. And it worked. Jake became more comfortable, more confident. He stopped trying as hard because, in his mind, I was already his. I watched it happen in real time. The slow unraveling of his walls, the way he started pulling me in closer, how he lingered in our conversations a little longer. He was starting to care. He didn't know it yet, but he was falling. And once he hit the bottom, I would be the one walking away. Started with the little things. At first, Jake didn't notice what was happening. He still carried himself with that cocky, self-assured confidence, acting like he was in complete control. But then something changed. It was in the way he looked at me when he thought I wasn't paying attention. The way his fingers lingered on my skin a little longer than before. The way his voice softened when he said my name. He was slipping. And I made sure to keep pulling him deeper. One evening we were at his place, curled up on the couch watching a movie. Jake had never been the type to be overly affectionate, at least not in a way that felt genuine. Before, his touches had always felt performative, as if he was going through the motions of being the perfect boyfriend. But that night something felt different. I had rested my head on his chest, feeling the slow rise and fall of his breath. His arm was draped over me, his fingers absent-mindedly tracing circles on my shoulder. For the first time, there was no smugness in his expression. No arrogance. Just something softer. Something real. He didn't even realize he was doing it. I smiled to myself, letting my fingers glide over his shirt in slow, lazy strokes. You're quiet tonight, I murmured. He exhaled a small laugh, his hand tightening slightly around me. Just thinking. I tilted my head up, meeting his eyes. About what? His lips parted like he was about to say something, but then he hesitated. For the first time since I had met him, Jake looked uncertain. I let the silence stretch between us, watching the internal battle play out on his face. And then finally, I don't know, he said quietly. You just make things easy. Easy? That was an interesting choice of words. I hummed, tilting my head as if I was curious. Easy how? He sighed, running a hand through his hair. I don't know. I guess I'm just not used to. He stopped himself, shaking his head. Never mind. It's stupid. I leaned in, placing a soft kiss on his jaw. Tell me. Another pause. Another moment of hesitation. Then finally, I feel different when I'm with you, he admitted. Like, it's not just something. It's more. Bingo. I forced myself to keep my expression soft, to not let the rush of victory show on my face. Instead, I reached up, cupping his cheek gently. That's a good thing, right? I whispered. His Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed. Yeah, he said. I think it is. Over the next few weeks, it became obvious Jake was falling for me. He started texting first. He started showing up unannounced, bringing me my favorite snacks or asking if I wanted to go for late-night drives. He started getting jealous. It was subtle at first. A quick glance when another guy talked to me, the way his arm would tighten around my waist in public. But then one night at a party it escalated. I had been talking to one of his teammates, laughing at some joke when I felt a hand slide around my waist. Jake. He pulled me against him, his grip just a little tighter than usual. What's so funny? He asked, his voice casual, but his jaw was clenched. The guy, Ben, glanced between us, clearly picking up on the tension. Nothing, man. Just talking about the last game. Jake didn't say anything. I placed a hand on his chest, looking up at him with a teasing smile. Are you jealous? He scoffed, but there was something flickering in his eyes. Of Ben. Please. But I knew better. I rose onto my toes, pressing a quick kiss to his cheek. Good, I whispered. Because you have nothing to worry about. It was a lie, of course. Because the truth was he had everything to worry about. He just didn't know it yet. Jake was changing. I could feel it in the way he reached for me more often, in the way his fingers would find mine absent-mindedly, even when we weren't talking. It was in the way he looked at me when he thought I wasn't paying attention, like he was trying to figure something out but couldn't quite grasp it. I played along perfectly, making sure to never break character. I let him feel safe. I let him believe that everything was going exactly as he had planned. One evening he invited me over, saying he wanted to cook for me. It was rare for Jake to do something like that, so I acted surprised, gushing about how sweet he was, how lucky I was to have a boyfriend like him. He laughed, rubbing the back of his neck. Yeah, well, don't get too excited. I might burn the place down. I giggled, wrapping my arms around his waist. I don't care what it tastes like. It's the thought that counts. I could feel him relax under my touch. That was the thing about Jake, he thrived on validation, on feeling like he was in control. And right now he believed he had me exactly where he wanted me. The dinner was surprisingly good. We sat on his couch afterward, a glass of wine in my hand, the city lights glowing faintly through the window. It was quiet, the kind of comfortable silence that only comes when two people are truly at ease with each other. Or at least when one of them thinks they are. Jake exhaled, stretching an arm over the back of the couch before pulling me closer. His fingers brushed absent-mindedly against my shoulder, his gaze soft as he looked at me. You ever think about the future? He asked suddenly. I tilted my head, playing my part perfectly. What do you mean? He shrugged, taking a sip of his drink. Like, where we'll be in a few years. I hesitated just for a second, just enough to make him think I was genuinely caught off guard by the question. I don't know. I guess I haven't thought about it too much. Jake chuckled, shaking his head. You're lying. I smiled, letting my fingers trace the rim of my glass. Okay, maybe a little. I mean, yeah, I've thought about it. I'd be lying if I said I hadn't. He watched me carefully, as if trying to read something in my expression. And I bit my lip, letting a small, shy smile cross my face. I see us happy. The words seemed to hit him harder than I expected. He stared at me for a long moment before finally looking away, exhaling a quiet laugh. Damn, he muttered. You really do love me, don't you? I felt my stomach twist, not with regret but with something else. A sick kind of satisfaction. I reached up, brushing my fingers through his hair. Of course I do. Jake leaned in, pressing a slow, lingering kiss to my lips, his hands gripping my waist as if he never wanted to let go. And that's when I knew. He had fallen. Completely. Irrevocably. Exactly like I wanted him to. And soon I would make sure he realized just how badly he had lost. It was almost too easy now. Jake was different, so much softer, so much more careful with me. The arrogance was still there, buried under the surface, but now it was layered with something else. Something more fragile. I could feel it in the way he hesitated before speaking, in the way he held me like I was something precious. He was trying to understand his own emotions, trying to reconcile the game he had started with the way he was actually beginning to feel. And I knew he was terrified. One evening we were out for a late-night drive. The city lights flickered past us as music played low in the background, and for the first time, Jake wasn't filling the silence with jokes or meaningless conversation. He just drove, his fingers tapping rhythmically against the steering wheel, his brows furrowed like he was deep in thought. I let the silence stretch, waiting. Eventually he exhaled, shifting slightly in his seat. You ever wonder if things happen for a reason? His voice was quieter than usual. Almost vulnerable. I turned my head toward him, feigning curiosity. What do you mean? He glanced at me, then back at the road. Like this meeting when we did. Ending up together. I smiled, reaching out to rest my hand on his thigh. You're getting all sentimental on me. He let out a soft laugh, but it wasn't his usual cocky chuckle. I guess I am. He drummed his fingers against the wheel again, then shook his head. It's just, I don't know. You make me think about things differently. I tilted my head, playing along. What kind of things? He hesitated again, gripping the wheel a little tighter. Like, maybe I don't deserve you. For a second I almost laughed. But I didn't. Instead, I softened my expression as if his words had touched me deeply. As if I had no idea why he would ever think something like that. Jake? I whispered, sliding my hand up to intertwine our fingers. Why would you say that? He sighed, shaking his head. I don't know. He stopped, licking his lips before exhaling sharply. I just think about how lucky I am sometimes. Like, what if I screw this up? There was. The cracks were widening, his guilt seeping through, staining everything. I squeezed his hand gently, my voice soft. You won't. He let out a breath, his grip tightening around mine. He wanted to believe it. He needed to believe it. He pulled the car over by an empty overlook, the city sprawling beneath us, lights twinkling in the distance. He turned off the engine but didn't move to get out. Instead he turned to me, his expression unreadable. Tell me something, he said quietly. I tilted my head. What? He swallowed, his jaw tightening. If I ever hurt you, would you tell me? I felt my heart pound, not with emotion but with the sheer thrill of knowing I had him exactly where I wanted him. I reached up, cupping his face gently, brushing my thumb over his cheek. Jake, if you ever hurt me, I think you'd be the one who'd suffer the most. He stilled, his breath catching. And I saw it, the fear in his eyes. Because deep down something in him already knew. I leaned in, pressing my lips to his, slow and deliberate. He kissed me back like he was trying to memorize the feeling, like he was already afraid of losing me. And that's when I knew it was time. The game was over. It was time for him to lose. The moment had arrived. I had spent weeks weaving the perfect illusion, being the loving, devoted girlfriend Jake believed I was. I had watched him slip deeper and deeper into something real, something he never planned for. Now he was at the edge of a cliff and I was about to push him off. The opportunity presented itself faster than I expected. It was a Friday night and Jake had invited me to a party at his friend Connor's house. The same Connor who had been there the night Jake made his stupid bet. The same group of guys who had laughed at my expense. I agreed, of course. I smiled, dressed up, slid my hand into Jake's as we walked into the house like the perfect couple. Everything was set. Jake had no idea that tonight was the night I would destroy him. The party was the usual scene. Loud music, red plastic cups, people already half drunk in the kitchen. I played my part as I always did, staying close to Jake, laughing at his jokes, making him believe that I was still completely, hopelessly in love with him. Then I saw it. The moment. Jake was standing by the pool table with his friends just like that night. Connor was smirking at him, nudging him playfully. Damn man. Almost a whole year, huh? Guess you really did win that bet. Everything froze. For a split second Jake didn't react. Then realization crashed over his face. His eyes darted to me, panic flashing behind them. But it was too late. I smiled. Oh yeah. That bet, I said sweetly, stepping closer. Remind me again, how much did you win? Silence. Connor, completely unaware of what was happening, let out a short laugh. $800. I let out a soft whistle, nodding. Right. $100. That's how much I was worth to you. Jake paled. Emma. No, I cut him off, keeping my voice light, almost amused. I want to hear it from you. What was it you said that night? I tapped my chin, pretending to think. Oh, that's right. You could cheat, disappear for a week, treat me like trash, and I still wouldn't leave. Wasn't that it? The room felt like it had shrunk. People were starting to notice. Conversations were dying out. The music still played, but underneath it was a thick, suffocating silence. Jake's hands curled into fists. His jaw clenched, his entire body stiff. Emma, listen, it wasn't real. I finished for him. Just a joke? Just guy stuff. I tilted my head, watching him break. Because here's the thing, Jake. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. I did hear you that night. I heard every single word. And you were right about one thing, I didn't leave. His breath hitched. I stayed. I smiled, my voice like honey. But not for the reason you thought. Connor looked between us, confused. Wait, what's happening? Jake ignored him. His eyes were locked onto mine, desperation seeping into them now. Emma. I stayed, I continued, because I wanted to watch you fall for me. I wanted you to believe you had me, that you had won. I leaned in slightly, letting my voice drop to a whisper. And I wanted to see your face when you realized that you're the one who lost. His breath came in short, uneven gasps. He looked like he had just been punched in the stomach. Good. I reached into my purse, pulled out a crisp $100 bill and slowly tucked it into the front pocket of his shirt. Here, I murmured, patting his chest. Consider it my parting gift. Then I turned and walked away. Behind me I heard his voice, hoarse, desperate. Emma, wait. I didn't need to. Because he had already lost. I didn't look back. I heard him call my name again, but I kept walking, my heels clicking against the pavement as I stepped out of the house and into the cool night air. My heart was pounding, not from regret, not from hesitation, but from the sheer rush of it all. I had won. For weeks I had played my role, sinking deeper into the lie, pretending to be the girl he thought he had trapped. And now the game was over. I walked down the street, letting the night swallow me, my breath steady despite the storm I had just left behind. But I didn't get far before I heard hurried footsteps behind me. Emma, please. Wait. I stopped. Not because I wanted to, but because I wanted to see him. Fully I turned. Jake stood there, his face flushed, his chest rising and falling like he had just run a marathon. His usual cocky confidence was gone, replaced by something raw, something desperate. Just let me explain, he said, running a hand through his already messy hair. That bet, it was stupid. It was a joke. I didn't. I laughed, shaking my head. A joke. I crossed my arms, tilting my head. You really think that makes it better? I didn't mean it, he said quickly, stepping closer. Not like that. He let out a frustrated breath. I was an idiot, okay? But you know me. You know that His voice cracked. I raised an eyebrow. That you what? He swallowed hard, eyes darting between mine, like he was struggling to find the words. And for the first time Jake looked like he was breaking. Like he had something to lose. I love you, he finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. I stared at him. The words hung between us, heavy, desperate, but I felt nothing. No warmth, no flutter in my chest. Nothing but the cold satisfaction of knowing this was exactly where I wanted him. He loved me. But he had still treated me like a game. And now the game had played him. I took a slow step forward, closing the space between us. His breath hitched, his hands twitching like he wanted to reach for me but didn't dare. I leaned in, my lips just inches from his ear. You should have thought about that before you bet against me, I whispered. Then I stepped back, looked him in the eyes one last time, and walked away. This time he didn't follow. Because he knew he had lost. Jake didn't call my name again. He just stood there, frozen in place, watching me walk away. I expected him to chase me. To try again. To beg. But he didn't. Maybe it was the way I had looked at him. Like he was already gone, like I had erased him from my world in a single breath. Or maybe for the first time in his life he realized that words wouldn't fix this. Either way, I didn't care. I walked until the sounds of the party faded behind me. Until I reached the intersection where the city lights blurred into the night sky. I exhaled, feeling the tension finally seep out of my muscles. It was over. The game had started with a bet. A cruel, arrogant bet Jake had made because he thought he had me figured out. because he thought I was just another girl who would cling to him no matter how badly he treated me. But he had been wrong. And now he was the one left behind. I pulled out my phone and called the one person I knew would pick up. "Hey," Lily's voice came through almost instantly. "You okay?" Lily had been the only one I told about Jake's bet. The only one who knew what I had been planning. She had called me crazy at first, told me to just dump him and move on. But when I explained why I needed to do it, she understood. This wasn't just about Jake. This was about every girl who had ever been made to feel small. Every girl who had been strung along, lied to, treated like a prize to be won or a pawn in someone else's game. I wasn't just leaving. I was making sure he felt everything. "It's done," I said, my voice steady. I told him. There was a pause. Then, and I let out a slow breath, looking up at the sky. "He said he loves me." Lily let out a low whistle. "Wow. That's almost tragic." I smiled faintly. Almost. I heard rustling on the other end of the call. "Where are you?" she asked. "Do you need me to come get you?" "No," I said, shaking my head even though she couldn't see me. "I just wanted to hear a sane person's voice for a second." She chuckled. "Well, you called the wrong person, but I'll do my best." A car passed by, its headlights washing over me. The city was alive, moving forward, not stopping for anyone. Neither would I. "I should go," I murmured. Lily hesitated. "You sure you're okay?" I thought about that for a second. I had spent weeks wrapped up in this plan, in playing a part so perfectly that I almost started believing it myself. And now that it was over, I expected to feel something. But all I felt was relief. I nodded. "Yeah. I'm okay." She sighed, but I could hear the smile in her voice. "All right. Call me if you need me, okay?" "I will." I hung up and slipped my phone back into my pocket. Then without a second glance I kept walking. Jake didn't text me that night. Or the next morning. For the first time since we had met, his name didn't pop up on my screen, no lazy good morning texts, no excuses to see me. I knew he was hurting. And I wanted him to. I imagined him lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying everything in his head. The moment I had confronted him. The realization that I had known all along. The way I had looked at him before I walked away, like he was nothing. Because that was the truth. He had meant nothing to me. Not anymore. But to him, I was everything. 3 days passed before he finally cracked. It was late, past midnight, when my phone buzzed. I knew who it was before I even looked. "Jake, can we talk? Please." I stared at the message for a long moment. Then I turned off my phone and went to sleep. Because the truth was, there was nothing left to say. Jake didn't stop texting. At first it was just a message here and there. Short. Hesitant. Like he was testing the waters. "Hey. Can we talk? Please." I ignored them. Then after a week of silence from me, his messages started getting longer. "Jake. Emma, I know I messed up. I don't even know where to start, but please just give me a chance to explain. Jake, you were right. About everything. About me. I was a selfish asshole and I never should have made that bet. But you have to believe me, I never meant to hurt you. Jake, I don't care about the bet. I don't care about any of that. I just care about you." It was almost pathetic. Almost. I read his messages, but I never responded. It was the perfect reversal. After all, wasn't this exactly how he had treated me before? With that same cocky confidence, assuming I'd always be there waiting no matter what he did? Now the roles had switched. And the difference was I wasn't playing. I had meant every word when I told him I was done. But that didn't mean I didn't enjoy watching him fall apart. A few days later I saw him. It wasn't planned. I had been out with Lily grabbing coffee and catching up, when I noticed him across the street. He looked different. Tired. Restless. He wasn't laughing with his friends, wasn't flashing that same arrogant grin. He was just standing there, staring at his phone, brows furrowed like he was debating whether to text me again. For a split second our eyes met. His breath hitched and I saw the flicker of something in his gaze. Relief, regret, maybe even hope. He started to move toward me. I turned away. Lily noticed, her brows raising. "Was that?" "Yep," I said, taking a sip of my coffee. "Damn," she muttered, glancing back. "He looks like shit." I hummed. "Good." She let out a laugh, shaking her head. "You're cold." I smiled. Not cold. Just done. And I was. For weeks I had put on an act, playing the part of the devoted girlfriend, waiting for the right moment to strike. But this wasn't an act. I didn't care about Jake anymore. Not his apologies. Not his guilt. Not even the fact that he loved me. Because love meant nothing if it was built on lies. And he was the one who had taught me that. That night I got one final message from him. Jake, I get it now. You're never coming back, are you? I stared at the screen for a long moment. Then for the first time since he started texting, I typed out a response. No. And with that I blocked his number. Because the game was over. And I had won. Blocking Jake's number should have been the end of it. But guilt is a funny thing. It lingers. It festers. And in Jake's case, it didn't let him walk away quietly. At first I thought he had accepted it. Days passed without another message and I assumed he had finally given up. That he had realized there was no fixing what he had done. Then the calls started. Not from him. From his friends. First it was Connor. Connor, Emma, come on. Don't you think you're being a little dramatic? It was just a bet. I hung up. Then it was Ryan. Ryan, look, I know Jake screwed up, but he's been miserable. He won't even go out anymore. Just talk to him. I ignored it. Then finally it was Jake himself. I hadn't blocked his number on social media. Not because I wanted to talk to him, but because I wanted him to see me. To see that I was moving on. That I was fine without him. But I should have known that wouldn't stop him. Late one night a message popped up. Jake, I just need to see you. Once. Please. I need to talk to you in person. I stared at my phone, my pulse steady. If this had been weeks ago, maybe I would have considered it. Maybe I would have wanted to hear what he had to say just to see if he had truly learned anything. But I didn't need to. I already knew. I typed my response. Me, there's nothing left to say, Jake. He read it instantly. The little typing bubble appeared, then disappeared. Appeared again. Then finally, Jake, I'm sorry. I let out a slow breath. This was what I had wanted, wasn't it? For him to feel the weight of his actions. For him to know that this time he was the one who had lost something. That I had walked away and there was nothing he could do to change that. But standing there staring at his apology, I felt nothing. No satisfaction. No thrill. Just finality. I locked my phone and set it down. Jake was part of my past now. And I wasn't looking back. A week later I ran into him again. It was at a coffee shop, one I had always loved. I was waiting in line when I felt it, that familiar lingering gaze. I turned and there he was. He looked even worse than before. Tired. Hollow. Like someone who hadn't been sleeping much. For a brief second I thought he might walk over. But he didn't. Instead he just stood there, his hands clenched at his sides, his jaw tight. And then slowly he nodded. A silent acknowledgement. Goodbye. I nodded back. Then I turned back to the counter, placed my order and walked away. Months passed. At first there were still remnants of Jake everywhere. Not in a way that hurt me, I had made peace with what happened, but in the quiet, subtle ways people leave echoes behind. I'd hear a song we used to listen to. Walk past a place we used to go. Once I even caught the scent of his cologne in a crowded subway, and for a brief second I almost turned around expecting to see him standing there. But he wasn't. Because Jake wasn't a part of my life anymore. And the best part? I didn't miss him. Not the way he probably hoped I would. I had spent too long pretending. Too long playing the role of the perfect girlfriend, the one he thought he had won. But that girl, the one who loved him, who would have stayed no matter what, she wasn't real. And the girl I was now? She didn't have space for regrets. One evening I was out with Lily laughing over drinks when I got a message I didn't expect. Not from Jake. From someone else. Ben, hey. This is kinda random, but I just wanted to say, you were right about him. I blinked at the screen. Ben, one of Jake's old teammates. We had only spoken a handful of times, mostly at parties or games. I had never thought much of him beyond that. What do you mean? I replied. A few seconds later, another text. He's different now. Quieter. Doesn't go out much. He doesn't even talk to Connor and Ryan anymore. I think he actually got it. I stared at the message, waiting for some kind of reaction to hit me. It didn't. Because it wasn't my problem anymore. Jake had made his choices. He had played his game. And now he was the one living with the consequences. I had no doubt that he still thought about me. That he replayed every moment of what happened, trying to understand how he had gone from being so sure of his own victory to being the one left behind. But that wasn't my burden to carry. I had walked away and I wasn't looking back. I typed out a simple response. Good for him. Then I put my phone down and turned back to Lily, raising my glass. To moving on, I said with a grin. She smirked, clinking her glass against mine. To making assholes regret their life choices. I laughed, taking a sip. And just like that, Jake was gone. Not just from my phone. Not just from my past. But from me. Because the truth was, he had lost me long before I ever walked away.